1955. 1 year before the wedding. Grace Kelly stood in her Hollywood apartment, staring at the telegram in her hand. It had arrived that morning from Monaco, formal and precise in its wording. Prince Rainier requests the honor of your company for a weekend visit to discuss matters of mutual interest. She knew what it meant. Everyone knew what it meant. The Prince of Monaco, whom she had met briefly during a publicity photo shoot at Cannes, was interested in more than friendship. The rumors had been circulating for months. Grace Kelly, Hollywood's ice queen, might become a real princess. The fairy tale the world had been waiting for. Grace set the telegram on her coffee table and walked to the window of her Sunset Boulevard apartment. Below, Los Angeles pulsed with life. Cars rushing past, people heading to auditions, to sets, to meetings that could change their lives. This was her world. The world of possibility and performance, of cameras and creation. Was she really considering leaving it? The phone rang. Grace answered to find her agent on the line, voice crackling with excitement. Grace, darling. Have you heard? Hitchcock wants you for his new film. It's called The Birds. The role is extraordinary, complex, challenging, exactly the kind of part you've been wanting. This could be your best work yet. Grace felt her heart skip. Another Hitchcock film. Another chance to push herself, to create something memorable, to practice the craft she loved. When does he want to start filming? She asked. Next spring. April, probably. I know you have the Monaco thing, but surely you can. Let me think about it, Grace interrupted. I need time to decide. Don't think too long. Hitchcock's offering it to you first, but if you decline, he'll move on. You know how he is. After hanging up, Grace sat in her apartment for a long time, the telegram from Monaco on one side, her agent's offer on the other. Two futures. Two completely different lives. She could go to Monaco, meet with Rainier, see where this potential romance might lead. She could become a princess, live in a palace, rule a tiny kingdom on the Mediterranean. It was the fantasy every little girl dreamed of. Or she could stay in Hollywood, make The Birds, continue building her career as an actress. She was only 26. She had decades of work ahead of her. Who knew what roles she might play, what heights she might reach? The choice should have been simple. But Grace found herself pulling out a notebook and making two lists. She titled them, Princess and Actress. Under Princess she wrote, a stability, a respectability, a real fairy tale, a escape from Hollywood's pressure, a family, a historical significance, a security. Under Actress she wrote, a creative fulfillment, a artistic growth, a independence, a the work I love, a freedom to choose, a recognition for talent, not title, a being myself. Grace stared at the lists for hours. The Princess column was practical, sensible, safe. It offered everything society told her she should want: marriage, status, security, the ultimate validation of her beauty and worth. The Actress column was about passion, about art, about the thing that made her feel most alive. She was still staring at the lists when her friend and fellow actress, Judith, stopped by that evening. What are you doing? Judith asked, looking over Grace's shoulder at the notebook. Trying to make a decision. Judith read the lists silently, then sat down beside Grace. You're seriously considering giving up your career for a man you barely know. It's not just any man. It's a prince. So what? You're Grace Kelly. You've won an Oscar. You've worked with the greatest directors in Hollywood. You have a gift, Grace. A real, extraordinary gift. Are you really going to throw that away for a title? Grace felt tears burning behind her eyes. What if this is my only chance at a real life? At a family? At something that matters beyond Hollywood? Your work matters, Judith said fiercely. Your art matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. But what about love? What about building a life with someone? You can have both, Judith insisted. You can fall in love with someone who supports your career, who understands how important your work is. You don't have to choose between art and love. Grace wanted to believe that. But she had seen how Hollywood treated its leading ladies. The impossible standards. The inevitable aging out of romantic roles. The constant pressure to be perfect, to stay young, to never make mistakes. At least as a princess, she would have a defined role. Clear expectations. A purpose beyond her looks and talent. "I'm tired, Judith," Grace admitted. "Tired of the scrutiny, the pressure, the feeling that I'm never quite good enough. Being a princess, it seems like it would be easier." Judith looked at her sadly. "Easier? Grace, you'd be trading one performance for another. At least in Hollywood, you get to go home at the end of the day. As a princess, you'd never stop performing." The words struck Grace deeply, but she pushed them away. Over the following weeks, Grace tried to make her decision through action. She went to Monaco for the weekend visit, met with Rainier, toured the palace, imagined herself living there. It was beautiful. Elegant. Smaller than she expected, but charming. Rainier was handsome, courteous, clearly interested in her. The Monegasques treated her with reverence, already imagining her as their princess. It would be so easy to say yes. Back in Hollywood, she met with Hitchcock about The Birds. They discussed the character, the themes, the artistic possibilities. Hitchcock's eyes gleamed as he described the challenges, the innovations, the chance to create something genuinely groundbreaking. "You're the only actress who can do this, Grace," he said. "The role requires intelligence, complexity, that particular quality you have of being both accessible and mysterious. I need you." Grace felt the familiar thrill of artistic challenge, of being seen for her talent rather than just her beauty. It would be so easy to say yes. She was caught between two worlds, two identities, two completely different versions of herself. Grace Kelly, actress, ambitious, talented, hungry for artistic growth. Princess Grace of Monaco, elegant, dutiful, living a real-life fairy tale. Which one was real? Which one did she want to be? In December of 1955, Grace made her decision. She accepted Rainier's proposal. They announced their engagement at a press conference, and the world erupted in joy. The fairy tale was real. The Hollywood princess would become a real princess. Grace called Hitchcock to decline The Birds. His disappointment was palpable even over the phone. "I understand," he said quietly. "But Grace, you're making a mistake. You're meant to act. It's who you are." "Maybe I'm meant to be more than just an actress," Grace replied, trying to convince herself as much as him. "You already are more than just an actress. You're an artist. Don't forget that." After the call ended, Grace sat in her apartment, soon to be her former apartment, and looked at the list she had made months earlier. She had chosen princess over actress. Stability over passion. Safety over art. The fairy tale over the dream. It was the right choice, she told herself. It had to be. But that night, Grace Kelly had a dream. She was standing on a stage, performing in a play she didn't recognize. The audience was full, silent, watching her intently. She was giving the performance of her life, completely lost in the character, feeling that electric aliveness that only came from perfect artistic immersion. And then someone offstage called, "Time's up. The performance is over." Grace tried to keep going, tried to finish the scene, but stagehands began dismantling the set around her. The lights went out one by one. The audience filed out without applause. "Wait," Grace called. "I'm not finished. The play isn't over." But no one was listening. The theater emptied. The stage went dark. And Grace stood alone in the blackness, still in costume, still holding her script, but with no one to perform for. "I'm not finished," she whispered into the darkness. No one answered. Grace woke with tears on her face. It was just a dream, she told herself. Just anxiety about the upcoming changes in her life. But deep down, she knew it was a warning. Once she became Princess Grace, Grace Kelly the actress would be finished. There would be no encore. No second act. No chance to return to the work she loved. This was her choice, and it was irreversible. Grace got out of bed and went to her closet. Hidden in the back was the dress she had worn to accept her Oscar. Elegant, perfect, a symbol of her greatest professional achievement. She took it out and held it against herself, looking in the mirror. Grace Kelly, Academy Award winner. In 6 months, that woman would cease to exist. Was she ready for that? The wedding preparations consumed the following months. Dress fittings, guest lists, protocol training, learning French, meeting Monaco's aristocracy, preparing to become a princess. Grace went through the motions efficiently, professionally, as if she were preparing for the most important role of her career. Because in a way, she was. But sometimes, late at night, she would take out that Oscar dress and hold it, remembering the woman who had worn it. The actress who had believed she could do anything, be anything, create anything. Where had that woman gone? Grace didn't know. But she suspected that in 6 months, on her wedding day, she would disappear completely. Replaced by Princess Grace. Forever. One night in March, just weeks before the wedding, Grace's mother found her in her bedroom, surrounded by scripts from films she had made. "What are you doing, dear?" "Remembering," Grace said. "Saying goodbye." Her mother sat beside her, picking up the script from The Country Girl, the role that had won Grace her Oscar. "Do you regret your decision?" her mother asked quietly. Grace considered lying. But what was the point? "I don't know yet. Ask me in 26 years. Her mother looked sad. "Oh, Grace." "I'm making the right choice," Grace said, trying to convince them both. "I know I am. Being a princess is more important than being an actress." "Is it? Or is it just what everyone expects you to believe?" Grace had no answer for that. The wedding was 3 weeks away. The dress rehearsal, Grace thought bitterly, was already over. Now came the performance that would last the rest of her life. And unlike her films, there would be no director to call cut. No chance to try the scene again if she got it wrong. This was one continuous take, running from the wedding day until death. Grace Kelly stood at the threshold of her new life, looking back at the woman she was about to stop being. "Goodbye," she whispered to her reflection. "Thank you for everything." Then she turned away from the mirror and began preparing for her final role. Princess Grace. The performance would begin in 3 weeks. And it would never, ever end. But there was still time. 3 weeks. 21 days before she became someone else forever. Grace spent those final days in a strange twilight state, neither fully Grace Kelly nor yet Princess Grace. She attended final fittings for her wedding dress, practiced walking with a train, learned the names and titles of Monaco's noble families. But she also watched her old films late at night, studying herself on screen as if watching a stranger. She took long walks through Hollywood, memorizing the streets, the studios, the places where she had become Grace Kelly, actress. She was trying to remember. Trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. On one of her last nights in Hollywood, Grace attended a small dinner party with close friends. Other actors, directors, people who understood the life she was leaving behind. Gary Cooper pulled her aside during cocktails. They had worked together on High Noon, and he had always been kind to her. "Are you sure about this, Grace?" he asked quietly. "I have to be," she replied. "The wedding is in 3 weeks. The dress is made. The world is watching." "That's not what I asked." Grace looked at this man who had been her co-star, her friend, someone who understood the pull of the camera, the magic of making film. "No," she whispered. "I'm not sure at all." "Then don't do it. It's too late." "It's never too late. Not until you say I do." But Grace shook her head. "You don't understand. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about Monaco, about Rainier, about the expectations of millions of people. I can't back out now." "You can do anything you want," Gary insisted. "You're Grace Kelly. You have more power than you realize." But Grace didn't feel powerful. She felt trapped, caught in a current too strong to swim against, being pulled toward a future she had chosen but didn't fully want. The conversation haunted her. 2 weeks before the wedding, Grace made one final pilgrimage. She went to the MGM lot, where she had made so many of her films. She walked through the sound stages, now mostly dark and empty. She stood on the set from High Society, or what remained of it, and closed her eyes, trying to remember what it had felt like to perform here. The lights. The camera. The crew watching silently. The director calling for another take. The pure, electric thrill of creation. "I'll never feel this again," Grace said aloud to the empty soundstage. Her voice echoed in the vast space, a ghost talking to ghosts. Grace knelt down and touched the floor where she had danced with Bing Crosby, where she had delivered her lines, where Grace Kelly, actress, had existed for the last time. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me be alive here." She stood up, brushed off her skirt, and walked out of the soundstage without looking back. If she looked back, she would lose her courage. If she looked back, she might not go through with the wedding. And she had to go through with it. The world was counting on her. The fairy tale demanded its ending. 1 week before the wedding, Grace's father found her packing up her Hollywood apartment. "Second thoughts?" he asked, watching her carefully wrap her Oscar in newspaper. "Third thoughts. Fourth thoughts. 100 thoughts," Grace admitted. He sat down beside her. "You know you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do." "Why?" Grace looked at her father, the self-made millionaire who believed in hard work and success and never showing weakness. "Because I want to matter," she said. "Not just as an actress. As something more. As someone who makes a real difference." "You already matter, Grace. Your work matters." "Does it? Or am I just another pretty face playing dress-up for cameras?" "You're so much more than that," her father said fiercely. "And you know it. Then why doesn't it feel like enough?" The question hung in the air between them. Her father sighed. "Because you're scared. You're scared that Hollywood will chew you up and spit you out like it does to every actress eventually. You're scared of aging, of being replaced, of becoming irrelevant. Being a princess feels safer because it's a role you can't age out of." Grace stared at him, shocked by his insight. "Am I wrong?" he asked gently. "No," she whispered. "You're not wrong." "But Grace, safe doesn't mean fulfilled. You could be a princess for 50 years and still feel empty if you're not doing the work that feeds your soul." "Maybe," Grace said. "But I'll never know. Because in 1 week, I'll be Princess Grace. And Grace Kelly will be gone." Her father pulled her into a hug. "She'll still be in there somewhere. Don't forget her completely." But Grace was already forgetting. In the final days before the wedding, she found herself unable to remember simple things. The name of her first acting teacher. The address of the theater where she'd performed in her first play. The exact feeling of standing on a film set for the first time. The memories were fading, replaced by protocol and French vocabulary and the correct way to curtsy to visiting dignitaries. Grace Kelly was being erased to make room for Princess Grace. The night before the wedding, Grace stood in her hotel room in Monaco, wearing her robe, her wedding dress hanging nearby like a beautiful ghost. Tomorrow, she would put on that dress. Tomorrow, she would walk down the aisle. Tomorrow, she would say, "I do." And Grace Kelly, actress, would cease to exist. Grace walked to the window and looked out at Monaco, her future kingdom, her future prison. She thought about running. Just getting in a car and driving away, abandoning the fairy tale, returning to Hollywood and the work she loved. But she couldn't. Too many people were counting on her. Too many expectations had been built. Too much had been invested in this fairy tale. She was trapped by her own choices. Grace picked up a pen and paper and wrote a letter to herself. She would lock it away, save it for some future moment when she needed to remember. "Dear Grace Kelly," she wrote. "This is your last night of existence. Tomorrow you become someone else. I want to remember who you were, before you disappear completely. You were an actress. A good one. Maybe even a great one. You loved the work more than anything. The challenge, the creativity, the magic of making pretend feel real. You had dreams. So many dreams. Roles you wanted to play. Directors you wanted to work with. Heights you wanted to reach. You were giving all of that up tomorrow. For a man. For a crown. For a fairy tale. I hope it's worth it. I hope you don't regret this. I hope you find a way to keep Grace Kelly alive, somewhere inside Princess Grace. But I'm afraid you won't. I'm afraid that tomorrow you die. Goodbye, Grace Kelly. It was a pleasure being you. Grace folded the letter carefully, placed it in an envelope, and locked it in her suitcase. Then she climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling until dawn came and the wedding day began. The dress rehearsal was over. The performance of a lifetime was about to begin. And Grace Kelly, actress, was ready for her final bow.